Welcome back. My name is Prince Rufaro Makaya. I'm glad you've joined us on this marriage journey.
My name is Chipo Makaya.
And she's my wife. Today we are going to look at the journey before the journey. So you're dating and you've decided you want to seriously consider marrying this person that you've been dating.
The Bible says in the book of Amos.
Okay, so if you look at Amos 3:3, just one verse from Amos 3 verse 3, it says, "Do two walk together unless they have agreed to do so?"
There is need to have an agreement or to understand each other before you get onto the aisle. And you can do this by asking some relevant questions. Sometimes people go for coffee and admire each other and fail to ask some relevant questions.
So for us, we dated for 7 years before we got married, and it was not easy.
What was not easy?
Anyway, the thing is, it's very difficult to concentrate on really serious issues during that time of dating, not right? So during the time of dating, it's very difficult to focus on the relevant issues. And if you come from a Christian background, you'll be told that you need to go for premarital counseling. And there are questions that they'll ask you at premarital counseling. But how many people actually pay attention during that time? Did you pay attention?
Oh, we went through premarital counseling. And we have friends that told us that they went for premarital counseling and they would even doze during the session.
So one of the things you can do is maybe have your own premarital counseling questions before you go for premarital counseling. And that way you can ask relevant questions in an environment that's non-threatening. You're not desperate just to get over this thing so that the pastor agrees to wed you guys. So you're going out for coffee, and you can have a list of things besides the fun that you want to have that you can start addressing long before you walk down the aisle.
So the first question you might want to ask is, what does commitment mean to you?
Now, that's a very difficult question to answer, but it's a very important one because you are now committing to living and making life with this person for the rest of your life.
And of all the friends that you have known and potential candidates that have been in your life, why are you actually choosing this particular person?
Now, if you go online and just Google premarital counseling questions, you'll see a lot of things that you can be asked. But we came across this list that's divided into 12 categories of questions that you can start exploring long before you go for that premarital counseling. And these categories are your goals,
expectations,
living arrangements,
children,
are you going to have kids and how many, money,
in-laws.
In-laws. In-laws. Let me pause at the in-laws a bit, because in our African culture, when you marry your wife, you're actually marrying their family. It's not an individual and an individual, but you're marrying their family. And so it's very, very important to get to know your in-laws. For me, it wasn't a difficult thing. I hear people saying in-laws are difficult and it doesn't make sense to me. But through the years that we've dealt with couples, in-laws are an issue.
Gender roles,
intimacy,
and how do you deal with conflict?
Your spiritual life.
How do you handle extramarital relationships?
And in extramarital relationships, things like affairs, things like your relationship with people of the opposite sex. Sometimes before you get married, you're very close to certain girls if you're the guy. How do you handle those relationships after you're married? How do you talk about it? How do you handle situations where after your marriage you may be attracted to someone, are you open enough to be able to talk about it and resolve those kinds of things? So we looked at commitment. The second thing that we mentioned are goals. What are your goals in life? Do you want to do your masters? Do you want to do your degree? Do you want to go to college? Do you want to do your masters? Do you want to do your PhD? What are you looking at, and how can you fit your goals into the relationship, and do you agree on those things?
Or do you not have goals at all?
That's another thing.
Or you just have a different set of goals. Maybe it's involvement in the community, or are you hoping to leave a legacy, and what is that legacy, if there is a legacy at all?
Do you want to make a lot of money, or do you want to give away a lot of money?
And do you want to do it with your spouse, or that is your own issue?
So goals, you really need to get an idea at least of each other's goals and see where you agree, see where you can support each other, see where you can do it together.
What are your mutual expectations? For instance, emotional support at the time when you are hurting, or at the time that you are really excited, you're celebrating success. What are your expectations from your spouse?
Simple things like, how big of a house do you want to eventually live in, can be very divisive in a marriage, because some people have different ideas of where they want to live. They have different ideas. She's laughing because we have different expectations. I don't mind a small house. You can say.
Let's move on to the next thing on expectations. Do you need time alone? Is it okay for your spouse to go out and spend time with friends? Do you want to have private, personal time, the two of you together now? Do you plan on having a date night weekly, whether there's a conflict or no conflict, in order to build the relationship? Those are expectations that people have. So is it possible for somebody to feel lonely and yet there are people in the house because that particular need has not been met?
The next thing are living arrangements. How are you going to live together? Now it seems like a silly question because you are going to be living together, but especially in Africa, is it okay for our parents to come and live with us? Is it okay for us to live with our parents for some time as we get ourselves together? Is it okay to live close to their parents, or we'd like to move far away from them?
When there's a job change, a better job, whether it's for the wife or for the husband, is it possible to relocate? Are you relocating the whole family, or is just one person who is going to move out? Or what is the impact? Would you rather just live together and let's not consider separating the family? Those are things you need to think about.
In Zimbabwe, we have a saying, Garandi Chauya, and this has happened a lot, especially in Zimbabwe lately, where families have been separated by opportunities overseas, and the husband says, I'm going to look for a job, prepare the house for you, you just stay at home and then I'll come and get you when it's done. And for many families in Zimbabwe, and we've had even here in Kenya, that was it. The husband left the family and never came back.
Yeah, very sad indeed. So what do you choose?
You need to agree.
Yep.
What about kids?
When do you plan to have kids? How many kids would you like to have? How many years apart should they be? But you know, with this one, let me say, many are the plans of men, but God is in charge of this business. Because you can say you want to have 3 kids and then you find you're not able to have children. What will you do? So even as you talk about these things, we need to allow for God's plans to come through. On the other hand, what happens if you don't have children? Are you going to leave your spouse in order to look for a child?
And this is very common in Africa. A lot of men leave the home when there are no kids because it's a very important part of marriage in the African culture, and they go and marry someone else.
Concerning children, it's important to talk about your expectations on each other whilst raising up the children. What are important values and what do you expect? What do you expect your spouse to contribute in those expectations? Or is it just one person who has that responsibility? It is very important to be able to talk about raising children.
Number 6, money. This is a big one.
Money, money, money. Now the question is, are you going to have 2 people working or is just one person working?
Are you going to have joint accounts or separate accounts?
Is someone going to be responsible for a particular part of the budget, or the 2 of you will sit and discuss the whole budget and be financially open and discuss this is what we have and this is what we're going to do?
Is anyone in the relationship bringing debt before even the marriage begins?
Or even when you're married?
What kind of debts are okay?
And is it okay to surprise your spouse with an appliance and its debt?
Are we going to send money to our parents, in-laws?
No, with in-laws, you have to figure out how much time do you need to spend with your original family. And are there expectations that each time you go visit your people, your spouse should always come with you? Or is it okay for you to go alone and spend time with them?
In Africa, in-laws are a big thing. So are we going to support them? How much money are we going to send? How often are we going to send money to them if we're going to be sending money? Can they visit? Can they stay with us?
And what are expectations between the relationship between your children and in-laws? And how are you going to nurture it, if at all?
And so when we talk about in-laws, remember in Africa we're talking about the whole extended family. So that includes your mom-in-law, your father-in-law, your sisters-in-law, your cousins-in-law, and their cousins and aunties. So it's a really complex web of relationships that you have to really agree and, if possible, get to know them. Get to know that auntie who's going to bring issues on the wedding day. Okay, she didn't have an auntie who brought issues, but we have a friend who had, or friends.
Okay, let's go on to gender roles. What are expectations in the home? Who's going to do the dishes? Who will cook? Who will look after the kids? Do you expect to help one another, or there are specific roles for each one of you?
The next one is something that is almost taboo in Christian relationships. I was actually told before this not to use a certain word. Intimacy.
It is God created.
That's all we're going to say about it. But the thing is, intimacy is such a big deal in relationships, and we found out even from our interaction with couples. It's one thing that you go in with one idea of how it's going to work, and you find out it does not work the way you thought it would. And many couples have very difficult situations because of that. So you need to start discussing it and maybe have relationships with other people who you can openly discuss any problems that you might be having in this area.
It is good to learn to talk about it, talk about the real problem on the table at that particular time, because remember, this is a lifetime relationship, so there are many things that you have to learn to talk about. It's like learning how to dance. It takes time, it takes effort. So I would encourage you to learn to talk about it.
Number 10 is dealing with conflicts. If you find it difficult to deal with conflicts when you're still dating, you need to learn.
One key thing about dealing with conflict is being able to handle an opinion from another person.
We come from different backgrounds and we have different worldviews. And one of the characteristics of marriage is that we are different, not only gender-wise, so we see things differently, but we also come from different backgrounds and we are bound to have conflict. So how do you deal with conflict? How do you reach out to the other person when you do have conflict and you need to reconcile?
Is it okay to ask for time out during a discussion? Or do you prefer to yell all your air out of your lungs?
Which you shouldn't do, because you die. Spiritual life.
It's important to be able to talk about what that means to you, and also expectations on how your spouse can help you in the journey.
Simple things like, do we attend church every Sunday? Is it even important to go to church, or we can do it at home? Do we even believe in the same things?
And what will be the expectations concerning the children? Will they be expected to go to church every Sunday? Are they going to go through baptism or not? Those are things to discuss.
And finally, this is a very difficult topic on extramarital relationships. And by extramarital, we're not just talking about affairs, but we're talking about relationships with members of the opposite sex, your friends. Can you still be friends with the ladies that you used to be friends with as a man?
Are there any physical and emotional boundaries that should exist in these relationships?
And if there are any, as I mentioned before, any attractions, how do you deal with it? How do you talk about it? Do you have a good enough relationship that you can address those things before they deteriorate?
On this same note, I would want to say it is important to realize that your spouse has reached out to you because they want to build the relationship. They want to build the marriage. So it's important then to be able to handle the whole circumstance in a way that will restore the marriage.
Okay, so those are things that you can address even after you're married, those 12 things, but it would be even better if you're able to talk about them a bit at a time during that time when you're still dating in an environment that's non-threatening, you're not fighting, you're just trying to know each other before you get married.
Yeah. So I want to encourage you to start talking as we continue to talk.
I don't talk, I just act. So we're giving away my wife's book. Like I said, mine is coming soon. What question? If you live in Nairobi, we can get this to you. If you don't, I don't know. But just make a comment, and if we like your comment, we'll send you a book, Praying for Your Spouse. Thank you. See you next time as we continue on this journey of marriage.
Bye. See you next time.